Good morning, this is the Catholic Lady, and we are reading Great Lion of God by Taylor Caldwell. The book is currently out of print, but you can find it in some used bookstores. We've been reading about St. Paul, and at this point, he still goes by the name of Saul, and he is just about to leave, or has just gone to Jerusalem for his training in the temple. Chapter 16. Shalom. Greetings to my father, Hillel ben Baruch, from his son, Saul ben Hillel. I trust that your silence, dear father, has not been due to illness, but from mere care and the preparation for the holy days. I have not heard from you since early in the spring, though Aristo writes me that he visits you often from his olive and pomegranate and date groves that he finds you well. Thanks be to God. Blessed be his name. However, his last letter troubled me, for he hinted that you appeared melancholy, and that he heard from the gossiping servants that you spend more time at my mother's tomb, though she has been dead some 10 years. I still remember her in my prayers. I have heeded your admonitions, given frequently to betray less impatience in my manner and speech, and to quell it in my thoughts. But my temper is a thorn in my flesh, and I fear, alas, that it will always be so. We have not seen each other for 2 years, when you last visited Jerusalem, and as I have written you, matters do not improve here, but rather deteriorate. I have visited the provinces recently, notably Galilee, and the lot of the peasants and the farmers and artisans becomes daily more onerous. It is bad enough in the cities, where at least 1/3 of a man's labor is devoured by the tax-gatherers, whose evil and detestable and accursed men. But it is far worse in the provinces. I am told that if a man earns the worth of 2 loaves of bread a day, he is permitted to keep but the worth of half a loaf. People of the provinces, therefore, live in most appalling poverty. Squalid and desperate, yet the tax-gatherers with their Roman guards constantly seize their small belongings, even their copper menorahs and their little store of holy oil, or even take their children from them to be sold into slavery. If the amount of taxes does not meet with the approval of the tax-gatherer, and does not match his books, it is quite customary for a hungry and hopeless man to be thrown into the filthiest of prisons for failing to meet his legal and proper taxes, as defined by the tax-gatherer. And who can gainsay the word of these vilenesses that walk in the shape of a man? Truly, it has been said that God holds the tax-gatherer as more debased and less worthy of forgiveness than a murderer or a harlot, a thief or a paedercast, a liar, an adulterer, for does he not combine in his one person the traits and despicable qualities of all these? It is incredible to me that any Jew, however he has sunken below the standard of humanity, can agree to be a publican. You'll have to pardon me today. I'm trying to do this as best I can, but I have a bit of a cold, so I apologize for the sniffles. I'm trying to fix this so the bright light doesn't shine on you, but shines on my book. Okay. Our cousin's husband, Aulus Platonius, informs me that the great Marcus Tullius Cicero frequently warned the Roman Republic that when 1/3 of a nation's income is devoured in taxes, that nation is at the edge of the abyss. Today, Aulus tells me, over half a man's sustenance in Rome herself is taken by taxes, and the empire groans into bankruptcy. Venality, crime, despair, the luxury of politicians and their schemes and wars, the hopelessness of the dying Roman middle class, the power of the wicked man fatted by the people's labor, and the licentiousness of the Augustales in Tiberius's court. If Rome suffers, despite the purloined wealth of her conquered nations, think of the sufferings of Israel, where the people are taxed by the Romans for more than two-thirds of their labor. Jews do not even have the government alms of free housing, bread, beans, meat, clothing, and circuses, as do the Roman mobs. But would we not spurn them in our pride as unworthy of men? Truly, we are not to be bought through our stomachs, nor through our senses, nor by depravities and gifts. There is something fervid transpiring in the deserts and the barrens and the desolate places beyond the cities, and Joseph of Arimathea has promised to conduct me to one of the lairs of the Essenes in the lost caves beyond Jerusalem. In my heart I have often begged for forgiveness for my earlier scornful judgment of him as a word-sayer and a compliant man, fearful of the Roman and one willing to compromise with evil. I see in this large and gentle man something mysterious, such as you discovered, for he does not speak all he knows, and his kindness to me is baffling, for I have done nothing to deserve it. But what it is that is transpiring in the hot and lonely spots, haunted only by goats and their herdmen, is known only to Joseph, and he will take me there within a few days. I remember the condemnations freely heaped upon the zealots and the Essenes by the men of the cities, and the accusations that they will bring destruction upon Israel by inciting the Romans against us. But when I consider the state of Israel today, I believe nothing can be more evil, more crushing. If the Messiah, blessed be his name, tarry much longer, there will be no Israel for him to rescue, no stone left upon the holy hill. No stone left upon the holy hill of Zion, no voice to speak his name, no eye to rejoice and behold him, no temple, but only abandoned stones and lifeless arches and empty marketplaces and rubble, and fallen houses and buildings, for my people can endure no more. We will find but a desert, burning in the sun, and marked only by dead groves and fruitless terraces. When a nation totally despairs, she must die, for her heart and soul have suspired. Let the Roman and his loathsome tax-gatherers rejoice then in a universal desert. But alas, the Sadducees wax fat and contented, still and serenely, engage in their various pursuits, and speak Greek, and visit Rome and Athens and Alexandria, and dress elegantly in silks from the Orient, and begem themselves, and live in corrupt fashion with concubines, and are entertained in the arenas the Romans have built beyond the gates, and gamble and join the Romans in Pompeii and Herculaneum and Capraea during the fashionable seasons, and live luxuriously in the Roman style, and are depraved. If one complains to them, as I do in my grandfather's house, of taxes and the despair of the people, one is regarded sternly and contemptuously as a barbarian who does not understand, as they say, the responsibilities of modern governments to gather taxes for the general welfare of all. It is useless to remind them that empires and nations have died in dust and ashes in the past because of taxation, and the profligacy of the governments who buy the people with their own money. They merely reply with superb smiles that this is another age, and that what is past is past. 2. They remind me a certain portion of the revenues collected by the tax gatherers goes to the support of the temple, and they ask, is that not a worthy cause? I think of the high priest and his cohorts in their gold and purple and gilded litters, surrounded by slaves, and I know the temple is profaned by their presence, and that God is outraged by their very existence. These two, the venal priests, oppress our people. Many of them smile when one speaks of the Messiah, and they murmur a faint word concerning myths and ancient tales, and the need of modern man to deal with his certain reality and not with fantasies. Are these priests the shepherds of the people, the conservers of the vulnerable flocks, the tender guardians of ewes and lambs, the lifter of hearts, the sustainers of souls? No! They have betrayed both God and man. They have made desolate the holy places. They have removed sanctity from the Ark of the Covenant, have smeared flaming words of the Torah, have subverted the natural laws of God, have dismissed with an arched eyebrow the statutes and judgments and ordinances, have defamed with soft amusement the meaning of the commandments, saying that they were valid for the earlier age but not for today. Because of the priests who have betrayed God and man, the temple is no longer a sanctuary, a dwelling place for the Most High. It is now but a marketplace where strange philosophies are discussed in the shadow of colonnades, and in the dusky passages, and in the quiet gardens, and men gather there under umbrellas held by slaves to exchange sophisticated conversation and news of banking, merchandising, and brokerage. The priests are no more virtuous than these, no more pious. They are content that the Romans pay their stipends and make luxurious their homes. It is nothing to them that the people despise and mistrust them, that they avert their heads from them, that they regard them as their enemies and not their guardians. They give their flocks stones to eat and dry dust to drink, and instead of hope, they bed them in the sheds of despair. I often remember what God has said of these. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because you have rejected knowledge, I will also reject you. You have forgotten the law of your God, and I will also forget your children. The priests lead us now, as God said, into a way that seems right to a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. Let the evil priests who have betrayed their God and their flocks beware of the judgment of the Lord, who neither slumbers nor sleeps. The priests offer their sacrifices, bought with the sweat-stained coppers of their oppressed people. And I recall again the words of the Lord concerning the false shepherds who have led their flocks to the destructions. I despise your feasts, and I take no delight in your solemn assemblies. Even though you offer me your burnt offerings and cereal offerings, I will not accept them, and the peace offerings of your fatted beasts I will not look upon. Take away from me the noise of your songs. To the melody of your harps I will not listen. But let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. But they need neither the words of God nor the admonitions such as Rabban Gamaliel, at whose feet I sit daily. Each morning he prays with increasing fervor that the Messiah show his face and deliver his people Israel. Sometimes he weeps, and his tears come hard, for he is by nature, as you know, a lively and learned man, of much patience, and remembers, as once you told me, that God speaks in centuries and not in days. I need to drink of water, sorry. Okay. Again, pardon me for my cold. I do not understand what he means when he implores the Messiah to show his face. For the Messiah has not yet come, for he has not been born to us according to the prophecies. Though you have urged me to visit my grandfather, Shabuah ben Abraham, often, because he is ailing and of a sore mind, I have not detected this. I cannot bring myself to do so, but on far occasions I avoid him. I also offend him. When I last dined with him, he was entertaining a number of scribes, those men of mind who do nothing worthy to be called labor or accomplishment, but only write books and advise politicians and dispose themselves elegantly and speak longingly of serving kings and superior government. They consider themselves of enormous intellect. I often wonder if they have bowels. I recall seeing some of the murals extant in the Mesopotamia of these scribes. They are always depicted with book and pen in their hand, by the side of an overseer with a whip, and reverently in the rear of the man on horseback, the despot. How they long to rule themselves, these little feeble men, who call themselves philosophers and intellectuals. For their hatred of the people is manifest in every urbane word they utter, and they have contempt for the common virtues and the simple faith. They have nothing but words, and the words may be eloquent, but they have no verity, no texture, except for sound, no profundity. Many of them are pederasts, as my grandfather once remarked in my hearing. But he laughed rather than displayed disgust, as if this were some endearing little eccentricity, instead of a repulsive depravity. Some of them write poetry, and have it copied by lesser scribes, and sold in the bookshops, and the poetry is like the breaking of wind. Who is the more contemptible, the Sadducees, the priests, or the scribes, is debatable, or who is more of an abomination. At least my grandfather and my uncles, Simon and Joseph, though Sadducees, work in their fashion and are producers and not mere devourers of men's work, as are the scribes. I thought to compliment my grandfather on this, jesting at the scribes I have met in his house. But to my surprise he was offended. He spoke of the scribes as the creators of the culture of a nation. If what I have observed of them, and in my listening and in my studies, is culture, then I repudiate it with revulsion, and want nothing of it. The company of a rude peasant, smelling of manure, and black bread and cheese and vinegar, is far preferable, for his words deal with honest realities, and the things of the honest and the holy earth, and his hands do needful tasks, and bring food to the marketplace. But what do the scribes bring to any man's table? Delicate noise which signifies nothing. They are only postures without import. Once the scribes were worthy of respect. They kept records for their lords and their masters, and counted the wares on ships, in granaries, and made reports. They made for a certain order. But these modern scribes consider themselves gentlemen, and feel that they should be prized simply because of their facility with words and writings, and their grave and empty chatterings. Aulus Platonius speaks of them in Rome and calls them deadly, but also remarks that Tiberius Caesar dislikes and mocks them, which tends my mind in approval to the Roman, for that at least. Aulus calls them maggots and the other men's meat, and I confess, when I heard this, I laughed as I had not laughed in many months. I asked a scribe in my grandfather's presence, "Whose books do you keep of household matters, and who is your master?" I was only referring to the ancient occupation of the scribes, and my grandfather was much incensed and implied that I had insulted his guest, a dainty creature with hyacinth curls and rouged cheeks and reddened lips and perfumed like a whore. I was informed that this particular scribe had written a play to compare with one of Aristophanes, which would soon be produced in a Greek theater. I am afraid I made a sound of which you would not approve, but I can see you smile. To happier matters. My sister Sephora's last child, a maid, is delightful beyond description, and Sephora and her husband are pleased, for they have 3 sons, and Ezekiel had desired a daughter. Sephora grows in beauty, and Clodia Flavius declares she is a young Juno, which I doubt will please you. Clodia then added, and possibly, a young Rachel. Sephora still has a certain lightness of deportment and a certain jocular manner, and a tendency to jest overmuch, which are unbecoming a matron of some 24 years. But she does keep her hair covered, and has a grave demeanor at times, and conducts herself circumspectly. thanks to that revered lady, Clodia Flavius. But then her eyes will glow like gold with the sun upon it, and she laughs without reason I can discern, and teases me that I once was not so serious and so solemn. Immediately afterwards, those same mocking eyes will fill with tears, and she will embrace me, and I find women incomprehensible. We'll pause here and begin with part 2.